All right. Okay. You can hear me okay. I'm going to go ahead and start up here. It says show my screen. Al, can you see the screen, just to be clear? All right. I'm sharing the screen. So really topic today is kind of the disruption that we've all been facing since the pandemic kind of hit our shores in March. And we're facing a new set of realities, and that's becoming increasingly clear. So the question really is, how do we adapt to these new realities so that we can thrive going forward? The key point is this is facing everyone. No one's immune to this, whether we're talking pure play or brick and mortar. I'm going to be focusing on sales growth discussions here today. So when we get to the end, I'll try to put a little bow on top of it to kind of really get down to some of the brass tacks relative to how do we improve the profitability of all this. So with that being said, it's first key to realize is if it hasn't become clear to you, competing online is really quickly becoming table stakes. If you look at this chart starting in second quarter of 2011, if we looked at the Census Bureau data across all verticals, so this is not just grocery, this could be hardware, hardware, clothing, electronics, books, you name it. We are at 4.8% of total U.S. sales going online, meaning that's where they originated. And for a few years, they continue to go up at a fairly steady rate of about a 0.5 percentage point year over year. And then around 2014, 2015, it started to accelerate that growth as really other channels, other product categories came online, whether that be automotive sales, housing, you name it. And then in 2017 is when, if you recall, Amazon announced the acquisition of Whole Foods, and we continue to see now a further acceleration at about a 1 percentage point gain on a year-over-year basis. If we stopped at the first quarter of 2020, you can see we were really kind of on trend, but we included the first quarter of 2020 because that ended at the end of March, and then you can see what happened in the second quarter. So that's April through June. And this is where people would say we experienced essentially 5 years growth in a matter of months. We saw just on a quarter-over-quarter basis, increase of 5.3 percentage points in total U.S. retail sales. So that's astounding by any means. Now that obviously went through June. The third quarter numbers from the Census Bureau weren't available yet, but based on our information, we would expect that number to have come down slightly. But again, the new reality is e-commerce and online sales are increasingly becoming table stakes and a larger percentage of the business. Now, with that being said, we know that online is different from industry to industry. If we're talking to someone who just sells food and beverage, here, according again to the census, it's 3% of the business. Now, grocers don't just sell food and beverage, as we know, they also have health and beauty care products. They also have general merchandise. So if we look at some of those industries, we can see general merchandise, which is primarily your mass merchants, your Targets, your Walmarts of the world. 10% of their business is going online. And then you can see even to the further right, furniture, home furnishings, over 20%. Now, I would say there are even some that are higher than that. This is the second quarter. We had clothing, for instance, probably close to 50% in the second quarter. Now, that was a dramatic uptick versus the prior quarter, and again, has since probably declined slightly. But again, the point is we understand that each of the channels are different, but we can learn from one another based on where each of those retailers, are in their own journey to adapting. Now, what is also similar about these is if you look at the growth rate. So if we focus on food and beverage on a year-over-year basis, food and beverage reported sales over 220% higher than the prior year, health and personal care over 100%. And then when we look at the sober realities and simply look at sales that originate in the store, you can see With the exception of food and beverage, every one of these categories that we're showing is actually negative. So health and personal care category has a negative 8% on a year-over-year basis relative to sales originating in the store. So said another way, that is a person walking in the store, taking the product off the shelf, paying for it in the store. That's not the same to say as online buying it for pickup. That would be counted in the online figure. So the point here simply is, while it's becoming an increasingly larger share of our business, if we aren't in it, which is hard to imagine many still being in that camp, growing going forward will become incredibly difficult and even more challenging without an online presence. So whether we like it or not, whether we want to discuss and debate the issues that come with the higher cost to serve of selling online, the point is the age of the omni-channel retailer is here. If we look at it specifically relative to grocery, which is based on our ongoing research here at Brick Meets Click, it's clear that more grocery spending is at risk. Now, the previous slide talked about food and beverage, personal care, general merchandise as separate categories. When we at Brick Meets Click look at grocery spending, we look at essentially the items or categories that are sold in a traditional grocery store or supermarket, and we ask consumers about those products. So with that being said, we're looking at essentially everything in the store, whether that's your fresh produce, other perishable departments, your center store packaged goods, frozen foods, general merchandise, health and beauty care. The only thing it excludes at this point is prescriptions. It would include all your age-restricted products, tobacco, and alcohol. And what you can see, if we go to the far left, look back a year to August of 2019, total grocery spending as a share of wallet was 6.4%. We saw during the COVID period, as it hit in March, we saw this quickly jump and actually grow to almost 25+%, and then come back down fairly rapidly to August of this year, where we're just sitting under 12%. And while some people will focus on the COVID early stages of this pandemic, I think the point is looking at the 11.9% relative to a year ago and understanding that magnitude jump in just a 12-month period really illustrates how dramatic and rapid the business has changed as a result of COVID. And COVID-19 really is the catalyst for that acceleration. That acceleration is in the adoption of how people shop and the way they buy their essential goods. And when you look at this also from a sales share perspective, we look at it based on how consumers receive those products. So you can buy products online and receive it essentially one of three ways. You can have it delivered to your home or office. You can pick it up at a store or remote location using various means, or you can have it shipped to home via a common or contract parcel carrier or courier. And that would be someone like the UPS, could be the Postal Service, could be FedEx, could even be Amazon Flex. And what you can see is the dramatic increase that we have in delivery and pickup share on a year-over-year basis, going from 57.9% to 69.4%. So that gain really underscores the necessity for a traditional brick and mortar grocer to be in the game, because you got to be in it to win it, as they say. And at this point, not only is a larger share going online, but a larger share of that spending that's going online is going to retailers that offer these services. So the simple fact is, if you're not offering an online service, whether it's delivery or pickup, well, you can see essentially how difficult it will be to maintain your business, let alone grow your business. So if you're looking to defend the base business, one reactive response is to be online. Obviously, going forward, the aspirations is, how do we thrive online? And that's a different conversation that we'll touch on. But I think the first thing we recognize is there's a lot of verbiage out there. It's confusing. It sometimes really clouds the conversation. So it's really important to start with, what do we mean by omni-channel retailing versus seamless shopping? We hear these all the time, but what do they really mean? And that's really important because in our conversations with retailers, large and small, it's not fair to assume that there is understanding, let alone an agreement of what these terms represent and what it means to the organization. If we start with the basics, omni-channel retailing is a function of strategy, whereas seamless shopping is the execution of that strategy. When we look at the strategy, we're going to be making choices about when, where, and how, and what our customers want to buy. And there's a whole litany of questions that we're going to have. But again, since this is strategy, it's about making decisions, making trade-offs that are consistent with our capabilities, our position, and where we want to go. If we look at the seamless shopping is an aspiration that we can actually measure relative to how well a retailer is executing their strategy. So said another way, we can test the soundness of a strategy by measuring how seamless the shopping experience is. And when we look at seamless shopping today in an omni-channel world, we're not just saying online seamless shopping, we're saying anywhere. So how can we make it more seamless, or said another way, reduce friction, whether a person is shopping in the store, whether they're ordering online for pickup, delivery, or ship to home. It's not to say we're going to be offering all those, but whichever ones we are offering, then we need to understand how well are we delivering against that promise. Because ultimately, customers today are looking for what we consider acceptable alternatives. Acceptable alternatives aren't necessarily better than what they used to do. It's simply good enough. And good enough may not necessarily be what's necessary to win more business, but it is at least the basis and the minimum standard by which you need to evaluate your existing performance. Now, when we look at seamless shopping, I said we can measure that. We've done that. I've shown an example here from 2018 where we looked at 3 national retailers and we looked at various aspects of the business using a framework that I'll jump into in just a second that shows where each of these retailers were, and more importantly, identifies areas of opportunity where those specific retailers could address opportunities to improve their respective performance. So, as you look at that, keep in mind, Target here has the highest score, obviously, of the 3. So relative to others, they're doing a better job. However, relative to the ideal aspirations of having a seamless shopping experience, you can see just how far they still have to go. Now, this scale also is dynamic because we know the expectations continue to evolve. And as those expectations evolve, we have to improve the experience. So in 2018, this is quite amazing that Target scored the way it did because it got dinged quite a bit for not offering the full range of product assortment that it had available in its store. Because as we know, it wasn't until this year, earlier this year, and then they paused it until recently, they didn't offer the ability to buy frozen, refrigerated, and fresh products online for pickup. So that was not necessarily in alignment with providing a seamless shopping experience because it did not improve or replace the need to actually go to the store. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how we actually look at building a stronger business from a demand side using our framework that is the basis for actually scoring how seamless the shopping experience is and how well you are executing what you believe is your omni-channel strategy. So in this, we have the 3A's growth framework, and it starts with the number one principle of availability. And availability, think about it in the traditional sense. You move into a new market. Well, that market before you moved into it did not have you physically present to serve and support that community. So when you move into that market with a new store, what do? You promote it. You have a grand opening. You have a lot of advertising and marketing. And what's that used for? That's to build awareness so that people ultimately consider you as an option for where they complete their grocery shopping. Now, availability online is not that different. We could have one store, or we could have 1,000 stores. The point is that in order for us to grow the business, we need to provide access to the services or our products so that customers can buy from us. So we've seen this go very consistently across retailers where it isn't just simply turning it on and we have 100% distribution. So where we look at scale, scale is actually inverse to kind of the strategic advantage a retailer could have, because a smaller operator with 5 or 10 stores can more quickly reach full distribution or reach as compared to a retailer who has 1,000 or more stores. But it is the basis for which we can grow. So we look at the reach that your services have, whether it's in the store or whether it's online through use of things like pickup and delivery. And each of those have different reach components that we can measure that help us understand where there may be opportunities to grow the business. Now, a lot of retailers in the US started with delivery. In fact, we would consider the US market a delivery first market. That being said, ship to home has been around for a very long time. And so it's not surprising when you look at the screen and you can see, ship to home, 62% of the households that are active monthly users of online grocery shopping are using that mode. Whereas if you look at delivery, it's almost 40%, and then for pickup, it's 46%. The real point here is that we have seen a migration from those who only used one method to receive online grocery orders to multiple methods. And you can see that here in the box that says August 2020, 34% of all the monthly active users online for grocery shopping used multiple ways to receive product. And you can see just how that splits. And that's important. And specifically, if you're a retailer who only offers delivery or pickup today, you can see just what percentage of the market you may be serving, or more importantly, may be underserving. So if we look at examples, you could look at Jewel, who launched their delivery a couple years ago, their first party delivery, and now have been more recently focused on pickup at the store, whether it's using their lockers or drive up features. You could look at Aldi in the Chicago market that first launched with delivery and then backfilled with store pickup. The recognition that a lot of retailers have had, and we've known for many years, is that you really need to offer both, simply because there are very strong preferences within households as to how they want to shop. Now, let me be really clear. This Venn diagram is based on all retail formats. So this is looking at households over the past month that were active online, and then determining which ways did they receive products. If we were to look at only you, a single grocer who offers delivery and pickup, which we have done, I would tell you the crossover between delivery and pickup is in the mid to low single digits. And that really underscores the opportunity or the threat, depending on where you're at relative to your business. Part of that has been, at least for the early adopters, a learning experience, recognizing that not all people are attracted to delivery for a variety of reasons. And we can get into that if there are questions for that. But the simple point is, as you look at the business, depending on what part of the business you're operating in, you need to understand that availability. And with that being said, I should also make note that the store, without question, still is the predominant method. As you could see in the previous slide, I said we were almost at 12% of online sales going of grocery going to online. That would imply just around 88% is still being driven by the store. We know from our research in August of 2020 that about 10% of the households did not make a trip to the store during the prior month. What that means is the other 90% did. They did do it a little less frequently, but they ended up buying more during those trips. And we've seen that in other research as well. But when we look at that collective group, we need to recognize that 40 to 50% of all US households are now spending some amount of money and some amount of time shopping online for a degree or percentage of their grocery needs. The second component of the 3A's growth framework is the attractiveness. So if making something available helps build awareness and consideration, the attractiveness is about driving that consideration and interest to actual trial. Now, there are a variety of things that we would have to look at to make something more attractive. And that is essentially, how appealing is it for me to shop with you online? Easiest way for us to measure that is how many of the categories that you offer in the store can I get online? So in other words, can I replace a trip to the store by simply shopping online? But that's only one component of it, and that's the assortment piece. Another part that affects the attractiveness is speed, or how quickly an order can be fulfilled. So if we're specifically talking grocery delivery and pickup, we have seen this increasingly race for faster cycle times relative to when we order. And then of course, the other component is cost. And these are the explicit costs that a customer knows he or she is having to pay for the privilege of using that service. Whether we talk about that as a value-added cost or service charge, these are additional costs that are very clear and present to the customer. So those three factors affect that. Now, when we look at the top reason for why someone who's an active online grocery shopper selected a grocery pickup or delivery service, you'll see 40% of them said because of the assortment. Now, that's not entirely surprising because we have a lot of unique products and services in our stores that compel, or we like to think, compel them to shop with us. The second is about 35% saying speed. So this would be, I can order and have it delivered within 2 hours or 1 hour for that matter. Cost is the least important reason why someone is selecting it. And it's primarily because we know we have those additional costs that we're charging to the customer. Now, if we overlay that with the mass merchants and supercenters, so this would be your Targets, Walmarts, Myers, Fred Meyers of the world, you can see the main reason why someone has shopped with them, or the most people shop with them, is because of cost, and specifically lower cost. So these are retailers that often have free pickup or lower or discounted fees for delivery. Now, we know that cost is not necessarily something we as grocers can win on. But what's interesting here is speed is actually where we have the largest competitive advantage right now. But that's not going to be sustainable, especially when we look at what both Target and Walmart are doing. We can see that that gap is going to close. So it really comes back to the main reason why most people shop with a grocer, and that's assortment. And this is where we need to really focus, because surprisingly, we don't have a lot of space between grocer and mass. And let's just keep in mind, mass stores, whether it's Target or Walmart, they do not have service departments. You do not go in there for the most part and talk to or interact with a butcher or someone behind the deli cheese counter and get a customized portion of product that you're looking for. So now we need to look at, well, what is the opportunity within assortment that may improve the attractiveness of our offering, not just versus mass and supercenters, but also other grocers. So based on some research or some work we did with a client just before COVID, this is a real case study looking at a range of grocers as well as mass across all the categories or departments, if you will, in the store. And so if you look at grocery A, you can see for the most part, they're offering everything that they have in the store online for pickup, with exception of floral, and the same on delivery. Now, with delivery, they don't yet have prescriptions. But what we can see is just how different that is. So the attractiveness is going to be customer specific. If someone's concerned about contracting COVID, and right now they have a lot of prescriptions and they're trying to mitigate or social distance, then the ability to use online to fulfill all those needs becomes very attractive. So if you happen to be in that customer segment, then grocer A or even grocer B could be more attractive to you than the others, simply because you have the ability to get your prescription picked up when you're also completing your grocery order. Now, what you could also see is prepared foods is very underdeveloped. Again, this was done in February of this year. A lot of that has to do with the fact that most first party and third party providers today aren't very well equipped to handle that fourth temp zone that is hot, or even just the prepared foods that may be made to order, like deli sandwiches. And this is an area where more and more retailers are looking, because we know with the stay-at-home orders that were in effect earlier in the pandemic, and now the behaviors that continue with eating out trends, primarily eating out with pickup brought home, that prepared foods is an area of opportunity that grocers can develop further and provide more service for. What we know is if we're working with a third-party provider today, a lot of that could be tied up with exclusive agreements. So as we break those exclusive agreements and look at other options, we may be able to contract with other service providers who are better equipped to support that segment. So you can see just how important it is to understand how well are you delivering against the experience. That experience as a basis of comparison is shopping in the store. And then the last and most important is acceptability, which is how acceptable is this way of shopping. This is what drives the repeat purchase, and then ultimately someone who's delighted or surprised and really impressed with it leads to positive word of mouth in terms of recommendations of referrals, whether that's paid or just organic. And so as we look at that, we can see across a fourth time or more ordering customer that those experiences are fairly positive for them. And we are not surprised by this, because this is a customer who's had at least three previous times interacting with a specific online ordering platform. And by the fourth order, they're able to really benefit from a lot of the time-saving tools that technology affords them, whether it be list building, past purchases. Recommendation engines tend to work more effectively by then. So very positive experience for that fourth time or more ordering. That's not the challenge. What we really need to be looking at is the first time orderer. And you can see across the board the experience or the level of satisfaction that those first time orders have is very different. And it's very different for a variety of reasons. One would be here looking at ordered everything you wanted. This first time orderer will have to assume has shopped the store. So he or she knows what the store has available. They go online and then they don't find everything. Now, there's a variety of reasons for that. It could be categories or departments like prepared foods that aren't offered online yet. It could be that the retailer has culled the assortment down, offering only certain products that sold within the last 12 weeks, for instance. But the point is that customer can't find everything they want. And that's really hard for us as retailers to understand, because it isn't as though they're starting with a physical list that we can see and understand. So there are a variety of tools and tactics we need to use to get better visibility for that. And then you can see, receive my order in a timely manner. If this is their first time using it, you have to wonder, what's their reference point? What's their basis for comparing wait time with your service versus, let's say, prior experiences? So you can see, if we look at the first time order, that's critical. And it's really critical because if you look at the probability of someone who's used your service for the first time, it's almost the same as a flip of a coin, 52% probability that that person will use your service again. Whereas if you go up from the first order to the fourth, you can see we get close to 90%. So if we spent all this time in marketing and acquiring a new customer, what we need to do is work just as hard, if not harder, to get that first time customer to the second and third order. And that's kind of the magic of three, if you will. So you can see, as we go forward, a greater emphasis has to be on maintaining the engagement of that acquired customer so that a customer returns and repeats the process, because it really isn't until the third order that online shopping starts to deliver against the promises of saving time or being easier to use. This is the simple reality. And I thought, just to help illustrate that, I found that a lot of retailers that I talk to, at least, aren't necessarily monthly active users of shopping online, and they may have at best tried their own service, but then more likely haven't tried someone else's. So I thought I'll give you a firsthand view of what I call the magical experience at Target's Drive Up. And I'll just roll the tape. So I'm driving up to the pickup point. I've already tripped their geofence about 20 seconds earlier. I'm putting the car into park here. And this is when the wait time for a customer would start. This is when they're thinking, okay, I've done everything. Now at Target, since I enabled my geolocation services, I didn't need to click I'm here. Other retailers, you may have to call, text, or hit a button. And so those are extra friction points. This is a very seamless, easy to use process, assuming I've enabled the service. By now you'll see that personal shopper is walking out. And if I went back to the timer, she was walking out about 15 seconds after I put the car into park. Unbelievable. Target's goal internally is to deliver their orders within 2 minutes. You can see after 15 seconds, she comes out the door. It takes another 45 seconds for her to get to the car. But all told, that's about a minute wait time for me, the customer. It probably was closer to 2 minutes internally for Target when they looked at their internal metrics. But the point is, that's an experience that I had with Target, and that's going to affect my expectations when I go and shop with your store. And the reason that's important is our research shows that if you're a grocer, then likely, and you're offering online services like pickup and delivery, you need to expect that at least 1 in 5 of your customers are also shopping online with a mass merchant or supercenter, so Target, Walmart, Meijer. And this example should hopefully illustrate why that matters. And that matters because someone who's gone to Target and had that similar type of experience, and they're not perfect, by the way, but has an experience like that, and then comes to your store for the first time, will be expecting a similar level of service. And if they don't get that similar level of service, you can now understand why they're less than fully satisfied, because they're wondering, well, if they can do it, why can't you? And while that may not be fair, that's the reality that we now live in. So as we go forward, to put this all wrapped up, and I'll flip it back to you, Alec, is put your performance into perspective. And let me just frame it up this way. We're going to look at the core stages of the online shopping process. When we look at ordering, it isn't necessarily enough to simply look at how we can reduce friction points to improve the seamless shopping for the customer, but how can we also cover those added costs? So we need to ask questions and challenge our strategy or test our strategy to see and learn if there are other ways that we can improve our performance while still delivering the customer experience that we aspire to. And so that may be looking at whether we mark up products or not. It will also include looking at our explicit fees. How much do we charge? When do we not charge? Do we use minimums or thresholds? What are the 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 strategies that will encourage someone to spend more with us? Obviously, ad networks are becoming more present as a way to help not only build the basket, but also drive some additional revenue back to the retailer through those placements. Obviously, as we look at that, those are all components that can help improve your performance, both from an experience standpoint as well as a profitability standpoint. We look at assembling. Assembling is the picking and packing and staging of the order. Right now, the majority of orders are still fulfilled from in the store. They'll likely continue to be that way as retailers continue to test and learn what other methods work for them. Obviously, considerations relative to volume and store density will dictate whether you look at dark stores or ware rooms or micro fulfillment centers or other things for that matter. But when we even look at the near term, we need to look at our pick and pack rates and see how we're actually organizing ourselves and whether we're doing a single pick or a batch pick based on zones within the store as a way to not only accelerate the completion of the pick and pack process, but to reduce the labor costs associated with filling that order. And then ultimately, when we get to distributing the product, this is looking at how do we improve the experience and the cost to serve relative to both delivery as well as pickup. When we look at pickup, you could see in the Target example, geolocation technology is becoming more integral and vital to delivering that customer experience, where the expectation now is 2 minutes or less. So anyone who's above that needs to be very mindful that you're being graded and evaluated based on a standard that's completely out of your control. And the consumer has the ability to determine where he or she spends their money based on what's most acceptable. And the same thing goes with the last mile. We're looking at attended and unattended. We're looking at real-time communications. And there are the litany examples I could share with you that would show that we need to be very present and very cognizant of what others are doing, even in adjacent spaces that we don't believe would be directly competing for our sales. So with that, Alec, let me go ahead and turn it back to you. I just want to throw up here just our final slide that our core solutions that we offer to retailers like those on the phone include the ones that are listed there, from the shopper insights and sales shopping scorecard to the benchmarking and forecasting, some of which we're currently doing with many regional retailers. We also have a report that was sponsored by Mercatus that if anyone's interested in getting a copy of, feel free to shoot me a note and I'll be happy to share it with you.
Thank you so much, David. And I want to remind our viewers to get your questions in. It's a very rare instance you get to this captivated attention from David Bishop. And I remind you, he's a partner at Brick Meets Click and is known for his deep knowledge of the convenience and grocery classes of trade, both the digital and physical sales channels. He works with retailers to evaluate retail concepts and conducts competitive assessments. So now is a chance to really pick his brain and get a lot of information from him. So with that being said, we have a few questions here. David, what should retailers be doing right now to strengthen their ability to compete for sales online?
Yeah, I think they need to be looking at this from the customer standpoint, first of all, and understanding many of the areas that I talked about today relative to how easy or how seamless is it for their customer to shop with them online, and how does that compare against alternatives within your specific market. We know that's going to be different from retailer to retailer, and understanding that will give them visibility into where are there opportunities for them to improve. It will raise questions that they should really embrace and examine. So I think those are the core areas first, but it really is putting their performance into context or perspective by looking at it from those two vantage points.
Perfect. We have another one in here. In terms of an omni-channel strategy, how should retailers be improving the in-store shopping experience? I know we got a little bit about that earlier, but from your
Yeah.
perspective, how should they do that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the app is the new loyalty program. We want people to see the full utility and value associated with using that app. So if we're in the store, some of the best examples are, how can that tool help people find the products they're looking for? So think of it as a wayfinder. I type in an item, I'm not the primary shopper. And in my case, I'm not, and my wife has given me 10 items. I'm going to want to put together the list and then say, where are these items? Help me optimize my shopping trip so I'm not walking or wandering the store. So Target is a great example where they provide that wayfinding capability. It's a dynamic tool that shows you as a little blue button, and if you build your list, it will show where all the locations are to a matter of feet, where all the products are that you've added to your list. And it will really help improve the shopping experience for the customer because it prevents them from needlessly wandering around. So, you have examples like that. Obviously, mobile pay, the ability to do other things, transfer and see in-store purchases when you're purchasing online, are all aspects that will improve the overall experience and in turn likelihood that those customers will adopt and embrace and use your stores vis-a-vis your technology and your platforms, and the app is the core component of that.
Now, I sort of knew that this would pop up. We're seeing mostly in California and Washington and Oregon, but it's making its way here to Illinois. Data privacy issues. So how should retailers, we talk about how technology could really help retailers and everything, but that brings obviously other issues. How should retailers operate within a system of where the data privacy is starting to become a huge issue with consumers and regulators?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, the security of that personally identified information is of utmost importance. We know through past experiences with missteps with large retailers, the cost, both in terms of loyalty lost as well as litigation and other legal expenses, is enormous, and it takes years to regain that trust. So above all else, retailers need to protect that for all it's worth. At the same time, they need to be more transparent and clear to the customer as to why they're asking for certain information. So for instance, enabling location services needs to be clearly articulated as to what's the benefit to the customer for using that. And if they understand that and they're willing to do that, then not to violate that covenant, if you will, and use it in ways, nefarious ways, that could ultimately come back to hurt you. Because again, the cost will far exceed the benefits of doing anything untoward with someone's personally identified information or the permissions they've granted you.
Yeah, and we found, and to sort of to follow up on that, we have found that soon you cannot make a retail transaction without transferring personal information. Think about that. You hand someone your credit card or your debit card. Well, they got to send that information to the bank to verify who you are, how much money you have, and they send it back. So any retail transaction has consumer information. And once consumers know that, they completely understand that. To be part of a loyalty program or to order from an app, there's over 50 contacts where your information is transferred. And we have found, and I think you pointed out, that as long as you tell the consumer, say, hey, this is common sense, but you should be aware that we have to collect this information to facilitate this transfer and this purchase, they're okay. It's times of when it's a surprise that causes issues. So I think you hit it on the nail on the head there. We have it, and sort of in that line, kind of, technology can be level the playing field, but how can smaller independent grocery compete against the large chains?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, and we hear it quite a bit. If you're a single store, 5 stores, obviously you're going to have different considerations than if you're 20 stores, 100 stores, or more. So, what we start with is it's a trade-off between two things: cost and control, right? How much are you willing to pay, and how much are you willing to give up in terms of control? A lot of retailers started with third-party providers, people like Ship or Instacart, simply because it was a turnkey solution that allowed them to get into the game more quickly without having to build those capabilities. Now as we see it going forward, retailers are understanding that they gave up a large degree of control for that cost consideration, and now the pendulum's switching the other way. So if I'm a small retailer and I'm in that camp where I'm trying to regain control of the customer experience, there are places you can go. There are providers out there that do specialize on the independent, small store operator. I can name them, but I don't want to promote anyone in particular and alienate anyone else. But even large e-commerce platforms, I'll just name one, Shopify, is a viable alternative to even using those established, vendors or providers that do support the independent. So it's a matter of ingenuity and creativeness, which I know retailers have in their blood, and then really a question of cost versus control, because both of those will kind of work hand in hand, almost as opposing forces when you go down that path.
Thank you. And as you know, retail is the most innovative industry. You either innovate or you fall behind, and technology is a big part of that. And so we really appreciate your time today and your knowledge. We appreciate your time. And if you have anything else that we'd like to point out for strategies or anything else before we close.
No, I just want to encourage people to reach out if they have questions. Also, encourage people to embrace information sharing with folks. I mean, we together get smarter by working together. We have that privilege of doing that as a profession, but we're in a very interesting time, very similar to when we maybe started with Meal Solutions in the late mid-90s, trying to figure out food service or other aspects. This is a real transformative period. The playbook is being written. The marketplace is shifting. And so I would just encourage people to question their assumptions, challenge their beliefs, but use evidence and facts to kind of support and guide, where they go forward. But beyond all else, if there's questions or people want to reach out to me afterwards, I welcome that opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for your guidance on these
Sure.
trends and developments.
My pleasure.